And at 10, Nightmare Funtime Freddy. Well, what did you expect? Of course, a nightmare version of Funtime Freddy is going to be on this list. It's basically like a requirement for any animatronic list, because Funtime Freddy is probably one of the creepiest and weirdest versions of them all. Nightmare Funtime Freddy is what you'd guess, in essence a recolored Nightmare Fredbear, actually. Instead of Nightmare Freddy, which I guess is understandable, but the real gem comes from when they make the Nightmare version look like the classic, like plastic toy look that the original Funtimes have. Because I don't know why, but for some reason the Nightmare aesthetic with like the toy look of the Funtimes just makes it absolutely horrifying from both fronts. At this point I never want toys again, but I'm going to buy various pop figures. I also am going to have nightmares about this version eating other Nightmare animatronics. Like, I think he was doing it to save me, like a Glamrock Freddy situation, but like still, okay, he could snatch me up without a fight. He could rip me in two. Nightmare Funtime Freddy, that's not where your teeth go. And at 9, Nightmare Baby. Originating in the fan game Baby's Nightmare Circus, I believe, or just being the basis for it, Nightmare Baby is pretty damn spooky. Being the likely originator for the stomach mouth present on the other Nightmare animatronics already made the thought of her as a nightmare terrifying, but throw in the classic Nightmare rundown aesthetic again despite being a plastic casing, like with Nightmare Funtime Freddy, and the countless sharp teeth in the animatronic mouth, this thing will make you see stars. Oh, and adding the Nightmare look to animatronics that can already move their face was bad enough, but thinking about it or actually seeing their face move and like reveal a nightmare endoskeleton is even worse. And at 8, Nightmare Toy Chica. Nightmare Toy Chica is honestly what you'd expect from a nightmare version of your favorite chicken robot. Not robot chicken, chicken robot. All the glory of Toy Chica with the horror of a nightmare, the countless sharp teeth, the stomach mouth, torn body even though they're a toy in plastic so it doesn't really make any sense, it should just be cracked. Exposed endoskeleton, you name it, she's got it. She's got it going on. And those without a beak are even worse than you'd expect. You'd expect that without the beak there would be less teeth, but no. In fact, they have the same amount of teeth and they're just ready to bite your head off. If anyone was going to have caused the bite of 87, it would be Nightmare Toy Chica, and not just because of the ultimate custom night line, okay? That's a can of worms that we've already covered in multiple videos. And at 7, Withered Nightmare. Oh, now there aren't many versions of Withered Nightmare, mostly because it's such an obscure thing to search. I'm honestly surprised that there was even a couple of these. Yet somehow Withered Nightmare makes Nightmare even scarier, with missing exosuit, I guess, and like the slightly transparent nature of the animatronic, plus the exposed bits and missing limbs. It always makes these characters more unsettling. But throw that onto Nightmare, the scariest animatronic in the series, and I don't want to sleep tonight. Especially with like the exposed brain and just, oh man, I don't like this. Let's move on. And at 6, Nightmare Toy Bonnie. I thought that the Nightmare versions couldn't get any worse, yet here we are. I remember someone commenting on the fan versions of Chica list saying that it was more like a fan versions of Toy Chica list, but the toy animatronics are just another version of the original, so it wasn't a different list. This is a monstrosity that needs to be banished to the depths of hell and then sent by Satan from hell to like the empty because he doesn't want to deal with it. I would understand why. Like, looking this thing up, I didn't expect to be as frightened as I was, but holy ever loving crap, this is actually, this shocked me. The toy aesthetic, again, just seems to make these versions worse. I don't know what it is. It's just like the toy animatronics as nightmares just make the absolute scariest versions of the characters. I don't get it. Like, if you have any theories as to why this is a thing, like maybe like a psychological or something, I don't know, leave it in the comments. Halfway through and at number 5, Scrap Fredbear. Scrap Fredbear is probably the most unique design for a scrap animatronic that I've seen. Most other scrap animatronics have Scrap Baby's claw as a main feature. However, this one is incredibly horrific in the best way. One has a buzzsaw for a hand, which is very badass, but the others have severe withering on the legs and around the stomach, and they all include that signature stomach mouth, of course, since Nightmare Fredbear is the scariest nightmare animatronic, aside from the one just literally called Nightmare, which is just an inverted Nightmare Fredbear anyway. The big withered left hand and the stars coming off of him just make him look more menacing. Like if Nightmare Fredbear was an elementary school teacher who just loved giving out gold stars, but then was corrupted by whatever these incredibly underprepared kids are gonna have to deal with in the horror movie. Like, I came out of high school not knowing anything about actual life, but you expect a group of 5 kids to take down some horrific otherworldly being? Like, who are they, Phineas and Ferb? And at 4, Twisted Nightmare. The Twisted animatronics are probably the most horrific animatronics ever described. These buggers are disgusting and horrific and are only approachable when using illusion discs to make themselves look presentable. I get that. Combine that with Nightmare, who is the scariest nightmare animatronic from the games, and oh my lord, you have one hell beast. Twisted Nightmare is everything you want to avoid when creating something for kids. I can hardly put it into words, honestly. Like, I'm glad that there's pictures that can be shown, because I honestly don't know how to go about describing this. If Hell's Gates had opened and released the entirety of FNAF lore into real life, and then the joy of creation animatronics emerged, including not just the ones from the game, but literally every other animatronic from the series in an ignited form, and then they all merged and became twisted, that's half of how this demonic monstrosity would have been created. It's wrong. I feel deceived. I feel sharp objects being stabbed into my flesh. And at 3, Sinister Fredbear. Ah yes. The Funtime Freddy list was missing a Sinister animatronic, but here we are with Sinister Fredbear. Had the game released, Sinister Fredbear would have been one of the most terrifying Sinister animatronics in the game. I don't know what makes this character so terrifying, but nevertheless, holy sweet niblets, Miley Ray Stewart, is this thing gonna give you a scare? While there really is only 1 or 2 pictures of Sinister Fredbear because, you know, the game didn't actually release, you can already get a sense of how terrifying this animatronic would have been. With the classic Sinister teeth, which at this point are basically signature, and the more toy-like appearance to his casing, this guy would have made the game unplayable for me. I already try to avoid the Nightmare Fredbear level in FNAF VR because I don't want to deal with him. I mean, like, I don't play much FNAF VR, but when I do, I stick to Pirate Ride because I don't want to deal with Nightmare Fredbear, so Sinister Fredbear would have just been a deal breaker. I didn't even know he was meant to be in the game. I would have seen it and just turned it off. I wouldn't even have played it, let's be honest. And ultimately, in at number 2, Nightmare Glamrocks. Nightmare animatronics are designed to be the scariest versions of their respective animatronic. That's why there's so many fan-made versions, because while elements like rugged exosuits and stomach mouths are common, like I said before, you can really head anywhere. Same with scrap versions, especially with scrap versions. However, these Nightmare versions are something else. Considering their pristine appearance in the trailers and promo images, well, with the exception of Chica, but there's a stark contrast between these two different versions. They seem to just have the ultimate Nightmare aesthetic going on, and it's not even just because they look like plastic toy animatronics. Like, it's like this is like the step up from the Nightmare toys. Like, I don't know what it is about these characters specifically. It makes me think some kind of way. Maybe it's because that Glamrock Chica is my bae, and now she's just horrifying even more, but again, that's kind of a kink. Like, I don't get it. Glamrock Bonnie isn't even a thing yet, and their Nightmare Glamrock version is scarier than their normal Nightmare version. I know that Bonnie got his own number, I wanted to reiterate, okay? Stay away from these if you can, and the reason these are higher is because it's a whole group of them. And finally, in at number 1, Hellmare. This was another animatronic that was recommended to me, this time in the comments of part 1 of alternate fan versions of Fredbear, and I can see why. The Hellmare version of Nightmare Fredbear is probably the absolute single most horrific FNAF-oriented thing I have ever seen. Like, I'm going to have to make a whole list about the Hellmare animatronics or something, because this is the absolute craziest shit that I have ever seen. How did I not know about these before? Hellmare Fredbear can only be described as a true nightmarish abomination from hell, and so the name is accurate. This thing had not 1, not 2, but 3 separate mouths, 2 heads. But not only does it have 2 heads, those heads are reversed from one another. So the head on top and the one on the bottom, they spin 180 degrees, and you either get Nightmare or you get Nightmare Fredbear. Yeah, this dude is both animatronics combined. And I didn't even see that at first. Once I noticed it, I'll admit, I might have peed my pants a little bit, okay? Come on, 2 heads, 2 sets of 4-fingered hands, and half of these parts being Nightmare, and half of them being Nightmare Fredbear. Look, I'm not usually actually scared when it comes to these things. I play it up for the camera and for entertainment, and that's why I'm so, like, light and fluffy on camera. Like, yes, they're scary, but I'm not actually worrying about them. I'm not playing this up. This is probably going to actually give me nightmares. Like, what kind of hell-raising sadistic motherfucker came up with this idea? In at 10, Human Nightmare Fredbear. Human versions of animatronics always set me on edge. I always get worried whenever I type this in because of what I've seen. I'm gonna start getting weird ads, which is why I always look these up using the Top 10 Gaming account. I've seen some scary man. Reddit can be a scary place. Aside from all the horrific things I've seen, Human Nightmare Fredbear is very Joker-esque in design. Some versions have the character more focused on that nightmare aesthetic, while some are more focused on the human normal Fredbear. But no matter what, it's always unsettling. Just human versions of animatronics are creepy. And based on the fact that this could in theory be possible in the FNAF universe, which you know if you watched the last video or any video where I mentioned this, but the idea that this could actually exist just sets me on edge and gives me trust issues. Whenever someone starts acting differently around me, I always get worried that they're an animatronic. And at 9, Breadbear. Breadbear is an animatronic coming from the Day Shift at Freddy series, who was created by Dave by modifying a Fredbear suit. The character appears in Day Shift at Freddy's 1, 2, and 3, and Breadbear's appearance is obviously similar to Fredbear, albeit wider. He is a golden colored bear animatronic wearing a purple top hat and bow tie with 2 black and white buttons on his chest. He has gray, metallic looking eyes, thicker arms and legs, a squarish brown nose, some smaller pupils, small white teeth, round ears with the inside color in lighter shades, and a very circular shaped stomach with brownish shades kind of like all strewn throughout. He has rips around his feet joints and arms. Breadbear also appears for real when Dave modifies an empty Fredbear suit and unleashes it during the Sting operation on Friday, in which, depending on which route you took earlier, it either attempts to kill Jack, dies, or just destroys the pizza joint and sets itself on fire. Love that. And at 8, Bearlock. Bearlock is similar to Fredtrap from the last part. In essence, it's just a FNAF what if where William was using the Spring Freddy suit to kill instead of the Spring Bonnie suit. The same ideas that were applied to Springtrap in this case are just applied to Bearlock. And thank you for the comments who suggested this animatronic in the last part. Those were really useful in making this list. And like, that's not the only one that was suggested, and like, those comments are the reason why this list was possible. Bearlock was withered due to age and I'm guessing flesh because, you know, it was combined into the suit. So there are exposed sections of flesh and muscle, just a lot of gore, with some versions having more exposed than others. But they all have good old Willie A inside, constantly screaming in pain, because that's what he deserves. These versions, however, I feel are more gruesome than Springtrap, but probably because we don't have a limit on how far we'll take these characters, but Scott probably wanted to make it still at least somewhat family or kid friendly. It's like how speedsters with no morals don't have a limit on their speed, or what they'll do. Because, you know, Flash season finale, because people still watch that show. They had a lightsaber duel. I'm mad about that. They made lightning lightsabers.
But it wasn't cool?
It was cool. It was cool, but it made me upset. And at 7, Fredtrap. To be honest, I searched this up just for the hell of it, and there are actually Fredbear versions of Springtrap. Fredtrap is exactly what you'd expect. Springtrap's look on a yellow Freddy animatronic. The designs are actually really well made, and honestly are scarier than normal Springtrap to me. I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how scared Scott himself was of Bonnie, but that could just be idle speculation. There are also even more rundown versions and even scrap versions of Fredtrap, which are already haunting when you don't think about the fact that it would still be William inside the suit being kept alive by the spirit of a dead kid. And not even the first one. But whatever. Fredtrap is definitely one of the more unique versions of Fredbear I saw for this list, and I'm pretty damn impressed. And at 6, Dark Nightmare Fredbear. Dark Nightmare Fredbear is an interesting character, since they aren't meant to be a shadow animatronic, like Shadow Fredbear from the last part was, but they're a purple version of the animatronic with additional withering and just a more horrific appearance. Some look like they would be Shadow Nightmare Fredbear, but Dark Nightmare Freddy is such a badass name that I love it. With glowing eyes and teeth and the nightmare aesthetic being cranked up to 11, this guy is surely going to haunt my dreams even more than FNAF already does. I'm not kidding. Last time I mentioned a dream where I was on a date and then I was part animatronic. This time, I had another dream that FNAF worked its way into. I'm not even kidding. I literally had a dream that I joined the Yogs cast. I've been dreaming a lot about that lately, but this time, while I was there, I still couldn't get away from FNAF. My TTT skin was Toy Chica. During the Jingle Jam, they made me play Five Nights VR. They even recreated a FNAF scene with a skit where the purple guy wasn't William Afton, but instead, the Bristol Pusher. If you know the Yogs cast, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I'm telling you, FNAF has invaded every aspect of my life. But honestly, I'd still be down if that's what they were gonna have me do. Yogs cast, hit me up. I can do both, right? Halfway through into number 5, Nightmare Entered. The beauty of Nightmare versions of animatronics is that they can really be anything. There are plenty of directions to go because everyone will consider different things to be nightmare fuel. Some are very clearly in the style of other Nightmare animatronics, you know, lots of sharp teeth, stomach mouths. Some are spider-like versions that are hunched over and wider than they are long. Some have more limbs or are combined with other animatronics like Baby or Funtime Foxy to create a unique nightmare appearance. You can lean more into the clown aesthetic, or you go a million miles north and do something that nobody else has is done, but that's just nightmares. That's what makes this kind of thing fun. And in doing so, you make something that not even Scott himself would have thought of. And isn't that kind of beautiful? Even if all these versions are making my currently blue pants brown, it's kind of causing me to black out a little bit. And at 4, Twisted Nightmare. The Twisted animatronics are probably the most horrific animatronics ever described. These buggers are disgusting and horrific and are only approachable when using an illusion disc to make themselves look presentable. Combine that with Nightmare, who is already the scariest animatronic from the games, and oh my lord, you have one hell of a beast. And before you get mad at me, Nightmare is literally just a color scheme flipped version of Fredbear. So don't say it's a different animatronic, okay? It's not. It's the same thing, just with different colors, alright? Twisted Nightmare though is everything you want to avoid when creating something for kids. I can hardly put it into words, honestly. Like, I'm glad that there's pictures that can be shown because I honestly don't know how to go about describing this. If the gates of hell had opened and released the entirety of the FNAF lore into real life, and then the Joy of Creation animatronics emerged, including not just the ones that were in the game, but literally every animatronic from the series in an ignited form, and then they all merged and then they became twisted. This is how this demonic monstrosity would have been created. It's wrong. I feel deceived and I feel physically hurt by this. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Nightmare Springtrap. Nightmare Springtrap is certainly a sight. Not for sore eyes though, no. If anything, this is going to make your eyes sore. However, every iteration of Nightmare Springtrap basically does the same thing. He gets the classic nightmare teeth, but the rest of him remains largely the same. Maybe he gets a slight change to his ears or his skull shape, but other than that, Nightmare Springtrap is mostly just regular Springtrap. The majority of people believe that Springtrap is already scary, and he already has most of the appearance of a nightmare animatronic, being one of the most destroyed characters in the games and especially in FNAF 3. One version I saw had like eyes covering all of him, but for the most part he looked either Springtrap or just like a larger fetch, but still terrifying. In at 2, Withered Nightmare Fredbear. I'm honestly surprised that I didn't include this in the last part. I actually had to triple check to make sure that I didn't. Withered Nightmare Fredbear is one of the most horrific versions of Fredbear that I've seen. The animatronic already looks pretty withered, but take away the limits of the nightmare aesthetic and boom, you have yourself some additional nightmare fuel, ironically. The one version even fixed the character but still managed to make them look even more horrifying than the original. With an extended jaw, missing jaw, or even missing chunks of its body entirely, Withered Nightmare Fredbear makes me glad FNAF VR doesn't have mods other than the full bright mode, I think. I wonder how easy a full bright mode playthrough of the game would be. Like, yeah, it wouldn't be scary since the whole scary part of the game is the unknown, but I'm fairly certain that would make the game crazy easy. Like, maybe it's how I should play it if I ever end up doing it. Should I do a full bright mode playthrough? Yes? No? You're all sadistic, so you're definitely saying no. I don't even know why I asked. Finally, in at number 1, Hellmare. This was another animatronic that was recommended to me in the comments of the last part. The Hellmare version of Nightmare Fredbear is probably the absolute single most horrific FNAF oriented thing I have ever seen. Like, I'm gonna have to make a whole list about the Hellmare animatronics because this is the absolute craziest that I've ever seen. Like, how did I not know about these before? Hellmare Fredbear can only be described as a true nightmarish abomination from hell. The name is accurate. This thing has not 1, not 2, but 3 separate mouths. 2 heads, but not only does it have 2 heads, but those heads are reversed from one another. So like one head is on top and then another one is on the bottom turned upside down so it can spin its head 180 degrees and give you either Nightmare or Nightmare Fredbear. Yeah, this dude is both animatronics combined. And I didn't even see that at first. Once I noticed it, I'll admit I might have peed my pants a little, okay? No shame. It was horrifying. 2 heads, 2 sets of 4-fingered hands, it's like this, right? Like, it has 4 fingers and they're like attached together like this. Like, half of these parts are also Nightmare and not Nightmare Fredbear. Look, usually I'm not scared when I talk about these things. Like, I play it up for camera and for entertainment. I'm not playing this up. This is probably going to actually give me nightmares. The earliest one that I could see was from Molten 500 on DeviantArt, but I could be wrong. But like, if I'm not, make it stop. You need help. I will help you personally. Please. And at 10, Dismantled Fredbear. Dismantled Fredbear is an antagonist in the main attraction in the FNAF fan game, Fredbear's Fright. Dismantled Fredbear appears to be a slightly withered version of Fredbear from, you know, the main FNAF games, except not Nightmare Fredbear, normal Fredbear. Fredbear's appearance is also slightly similar to that of Dismantled Spring Bonnie from that game as well, although with a purple hat and tie and a darker brown coloration for his suit. Due to being a Springlock character, he also has 5 fingers on each hand, but only has 4 toes on each foot. But I mean, like, I guess animatronic feet are bigger than human feet. His right eye is also broken and hangs open, and the suit covering his extremities seems to have scattered holes. There are also presumably blood stains on his teeth, and that's probably because of the bite of 83 that we see take place in FNAF 4, which presumably causes the Springlock suits to get discontinued and then deemed unfit for employees. You know. This thing, while not horribly destroyed, is still off-putting. In at 9, Shadow Fredbear. Shadow Fredbear is one of the 2 primary antagonists in Final Nights 2 Sins of the Father. Shadow Fredbear is almost perfectly intact, only burnt black in color. He has a few rips on his body though, and is missing his left hand. The area around his mouth also appears to be torn slightly as well, revealing a majority of his endoskeleton teeth. His teeth and eyes also glow, which makes him easier to see. Imagine though, if this animatronic had actual gums. Like, if he did, that would probably be the scariest thing that you could ever see. Like, the absolute monstrosity that would have been created just by giving Shadow Freddy gums is horrifying. My genius is sometimes petrifying. But, nonetheless, this is still creepy without the gums. Especially because this dude is so powerful that he replaces most of the other animatronics on Night 5 of Final Nights 2. But, if you saw the whole Final Nights list, you already know all about Shadow Freddy. Link's up there. Click it. I hope it's that corner. And at 8, Fixed Nightmare Fredbear. Fixed Nightmare Fredbear is something that I never wanted to see. For some reason, he reminds me of my uncle if he was a yellow animatronic robot bear, but it's not like in an insulting way. Like, I'm not saying like he's big or anything. I can't really put my finger on why. He just reminds me of him. It's fine, he's rich. Anyway, Repaired Nightmare Fredbear is just what you'd expect, unless it's the one that just is covered in band-aids and paper to fix his eyes and teeth. That one's actually pretty funny. However, it had to be Fixed Nightmare Fredbear because Fixed Fredbear is just a slightly darker golden Freddy. I don't really know what it is about these repaired animatronics that makes them so creepy. Maybe it's the fact that they're just more realistic, or that it could in theory actually exist. I mean, if you're going by the many worlds theory, there is already a world where FNAF is real, and there is a world where each FNAF fan game is real. I mean, there is a world where I am personally fighting William Afton. Yet there is also a world where I am William Afton. None of them are this world though. Yet I still find these repaired animatronics to just be wrong. And at 7, Nightmare Glamrock Bonnie. Yet another set of animatronics without any Bonnie representation. The Security Breach Glamrock animatronics, from what we've seen in the trailers so far, don't have a Glamrock Bonnie. He really only appears as the mascot of bowling. However, fans here yet again made Glamrock versions of Bonnie, but those weren't really scary. So in classic FNAF fashion, if you want something to be scarier, you just throw Nightmare in front of it, and then boom, you have an unholy abomination that will eat your soul and devour your balls. Nevertheless, Nightmare Glamrock Bonnie looks exactly how you'd expect a Nightmare version of Glamrock Bonnie to look, with shoulder pads. That's the scariest part. And at 6, Realistic Fredbear. Now, looking up Realistic Fredbear will not yield this result on Google Images. This was found using the keyword Stylized Fredbear. But after looking at this bear on the Big Blue House wannabe, I felt Realistic Fredbear was the best name for it. Created as a commission by DeviantArt user Trike Vinang Studio, this perfectly describes my worst nightmare come to life. No joke, I had a dream where I was on a date with this girl and I go to take a shower. But when I'm done, I get dressed and ask her what head I should wear, and reveal to her, and I guess myself, that I am part animatronic. No joke, that's actually a dream I had. This is what this channel has done to me. This is what you have done to me. None of you clicked on that Minecraft video, okay? Every FNAF video keeps doing well, so I have to keep making them. This is what you're doing to me. Do you not understand? And this thing just feels like it would be in that world. This furry animatronic is absolutely terrifying in the worst of ways. Like, not even like so terrifying that it's good. Like, please, for the love of God, don't make this a real animatronic or I will puke. Halfway through into number 5, Stylized Nightmare Fredbear. There are so many different versions of Stylized Nightmare Fredbear, I love it. I'm pretty sure stylized just means converting the character into your style, which makes the variety incredible to look at. From more cartoony but still horrific versions to a Frankenstein's monster looking version that will actually haunt me for the rest of my life. Like, if this is what the Halloween DLC was instead of Breadbear, I don't think I'd be as into that DLC as I am. Some of these teeth are absolute monsters creatures within themselves. Some looking like monster animatronics from Five Nights at Candy's, some looking like it's going to crawl out of my screen just so it can kill me. Nightmare Fredbear is one of the scariest animatronics to me, and I honestly think that if I ever had to play that level in FNAF VR, I would piss myself. Like, not even joking. Like, that's why I don't play FNAF VR. So I don't have to deal with that level and that level only. I also think that I'd be trash at the plush baby game, and I don't like being jump scared. It's horrible. Why do people like it? Fear is a bad thing. I'm gonna be questioning this for the rest of my life. And then for Demented Fredbear. Now, it could be my search history. However, when looking up the word Demented on Google Images, the first thing Google recommended to me was Demented Fredbear. And looking at it, I can see why. Demented Fredbear is what Nightmare Fredbear should have been in my opinion. The exterior isn't as torn on the torso, and instead keeping the tearing mostly at the joints and extremities, and overall, the appearance just seems more aggressive and bloodthirsty. Some iterations of this character even have tongues coming out of both mouths. You know, the mouth on his face as well as the famous stomach mouth that makes us think that Crying Child saw Elizabeth get scooped. Yeah, they have tongues now. Demented Fredbear's nails are also extremely long and very sharp, easily being able to tear through flesh or dig back down to the pits of hell from which it came. This is actually so well made that I moved it up from its original position. It was at number 6, but I feel like number 3 is more realistic, even if it's not at number 3 now, it's at number 4. It was at number 6, but I feel like number 4 is more realistic, even if realistic Fredbear was pretty damn horrifying, but for a completely different reason. And at 3, Paranormal Fredbear. Paranormal Fredbear was not what I first anticipated. I thought it was going to be closer to Nightmare with a translucent body and a more wisp mother-like appearance, but instead Paranormal Fredbear by Taurus4 on DeviantArt is terrifying. In essence, a Reaper Fredbear. This paranormal version is how I feel like a Reaper Fredbear would look like in the Final Night series, with endoskeleton bits holding together a melted and tearing face, and not only the face but the body as well, and the movement's just jerky enough to make you question it, but also just make you really unsettled. The long sharp claws can easily cut through flesh, and the teeth, while not being sharp, will still set you on edge. They're nearly human, but not quite, making it horrifying to say the least. If they're actually human, that's horrifying for an entirely different reason, but this, it does it in the right way. Not to mention the paranormal Springtrap that he made. Like, I may have to save that for another list because, oh boy. Penultimately, in at number 2, Twisted Fredbear. Twisted Fredbear has to be one of the worst creations known to man. Not in an it's so bad it's scary kind of way, but in an oh my god, what twisted mind could have created this unholy monster from the deepest pits of hell kind of way. Twisted Fredbear takes everything that makes the twisted animatronic scary and adds in to Nightmare Fredbear. From boils all over to extra sharp teeth and claws, some even have a tongue coming out of the stomach mouth, but like an actual tongue, not like the other one. Like if it was a human tongue coming out of the stomach mouth, which is just wrong on so many levels. Some people also made the joints teeth, which is just a whole other can of worms that I'm not even gonna get into. And these all just make me want to crawl into a hole and die. Like, I'm horrified by the amount of creativity, I'll say, to come out of the FNAF community. Like, we need like a community pot for money for therapy or something, because clearly a lot of us could use it. Like, not in a bad way though, but clearly there are some repressed issues that are coming to light. Finally, in at number 1, Slasher Fredbear. Slasher Fredbear by DeviantArt user PlayStation Jedi is an unholy abomination that must be stopped. I've talked about the Slasher animatronics before, particularly in the Bonnie alternate versions list. However, Slasher Fredbear is so much worse. He may not have a shotgun axe guitar, but oh my god. Let me read the description of this animatronic in the words of PlayStation Jedi himself. Ahem. Quote, the largest and strongest of all slasher animatronics, Slasher Fredbear is an unstoppable force with enhanced strength and durability. Fredbear is capable of smashing through walls, withstanding lots of punishment, and grabbing heavy objects and throwing them across the room. While Fredbear uses his great strength to pick up and rip people in half, if he needs a quick kill, he can extend a blade mounted to his wrist to cut through people like butter. Or if he needs a ranged attack, he can use his 2 wrist-mounted LMG guns. Fredbear can switch between these weapons on the fly, either using 2 LMGs or 2 blades on each wrist. What the actual LMG, by the way, stands for light machine gun. Jesus ever-loving Christ, this is going to make me cry myself to sleep. Not to mention the spikes covering his body, or the incredible amount of blood that is just soaking into him, covering him from head to toe. This dude has light machine guns on his wrists. Ah!